As you know, my name's Terry Brandon. I'm the Southwest Regional Rep on your executive. I'd like to introduce our panel. As I've stated, it's recognizing stress and promoting wellness in the profession as our topic this afternoon. Darryl's getting excited.
My friends are back there. Betty and Alfie and Joan and hi guys. All the way from Newmarket.
And when you leave, you'll have more friends.
All the way from Newmarket.
What we're going to do this afternoon is allow each of the individuals to give a brief introduction themselves, and at the end of the 4 introductions here, I'm going to say a couple words about some background that I have, and then I'm going to launch into a couple key questions and just see where our panel discussion goes from there. So that starts with you, Darryl Singer. Just your little introduction of yourself, whatever you'd like to say to everyone. Who are you?
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Hi, how's everybody? Well, hi, I'm Darryl Singer. So I am presently the head of commercial and civil litigation at a law firm in Toronto called Diamond & Diamond. And I am on this panel because I've been very public over the last 8 or so years about the struggles that I went through in 2008 and 2009 with an addiction and depression issue, primarily an addiction to narcotics, that took place basically between 2006 and 2008, forced me to close my practice in 2009, seek help from what the predecessor of the Members Assistance Program, then called OLAP, and then I came back to practice and started a new firm in 2010, and have spent an awful lot of time in the last 8 years writing and speaking at conferences like this about the things that I've been through, with the message that you need to get help and you can have a second act and your life can be better. And I guess we'll get into that a little bit later.
We will, thank you. And Janet?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Janet Ozembloski. I'm a lawyer. I practice at the Medcan clinic in downtown Toronto. I'm their in-house lawyer. I'm here because I do work in the context of my job with our mental health group, and we have a group of psychologists, psychiatrists, and social workers. I work on a daily basis with employee well-being, both in the context of Medcan and our people, and in the context of people who come to seek help from us. I've spoken before with Katie Robinette, and I look forward to speaking with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you. Leah?
Hi, my name is Leah Gardner. I'm the executive director for an organization called Mindfulness Without Borders. And what we do is support people of all walks of life to develop tools and skill sets to help them build self-awareness and also learn how to manage stress in their personal and professional lives.
Thank you. And before moving on to the next gentleman, Percy, initial G. Percy has asked if I could please ask everyone not to take any photographs. You may question the running of the camera, but we have made a special arrangement that the camera will not be focusing on Percy G. And that is because this gentleman comes to us as a lawyer, and he intends to discuss some 12-step programming with us here today. Percy?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Percy. I'm an alcoholic and a lawyer. I graduated from Dalhousie Law School in 1972, admitted to the bar in Ontario in 1974, practiced in association in Gravenhurst with Stewart and Cruikshank for 2 years, and then started a practice on my own. I have been a sole practitioner in a general practice in Gravenhurst since that time until 1995, September the 28th, 1995, which, as a result of the investigation by the Law Society of Upper Canada then, I was suspended for a period of 3 years. And when finally readmitted to the bar, I was under the supervision of a lawyer.
Keep going, Percy.
Oh.
It's just you're too close.
And my final points were ultimately removed from me in 2012. I've been involved in a 12-step program, Alcoholics Anonymous, since September the 8th of 1993. I've just celebrated 25 years of sobriety, and I have managed to have various service positions in Alcoholics Anonymous, including the representation of Western Ontario, which is Area 86 in North America, to the General Service Office in New York for 2 years, for the years of 2012 and 2013.
Thank you, Percy. We're pleased you're here, and we're pleased that all of the panelists are able to join us this afternoon. I would like to share with everyone something I read from the Canadian press, quote, "Forgotten MP." I don't know if others in this room saw this week. It was about a World War I veteran who returned to Canada only to take his own life, committing suicide. There is a plaque for this gentleman that is going to be placed outside the House of Commons. That is the change in our day and age now from back at the time of World War I. I can tell you that I volunteered today to serve as moderator on this panel specifically because I know a great deal about addictions from my family of origin. I also know the success of the AA program, with both my parents being in the program for over 30 years. They are still married. It is a very successful program. It saves lives and it saves families. So I'm aware of alcoholism, genetically speaking. I had 2 generations before my family, my parents, who finally said, no, enough is enough, who both died from cirrhosis of the liver. But what I want to share more with you today is a true story about my previous husband. And I thank Jay for opening up last night about your situation. And I shared with the executive about my previous husband, who was a professional, not a lawyer. He was a medical physician. He took his own life on March 13 of the year 2013. Our son was only 9 years of age. I can tell you that prior to that fateful Wednesday, when he chose to jump off a building, we had a hospital bed for him the Friday before. I was working with the Ontario Medical Association and the powers that be to get him help. His psychiatrist phoned on the Thursday evening before he was to go to the hospital, and he was relieved to go and wanted to go on the Friday. And I can tell you, his treating psychiatrist canceled his bed unilaterally by his choice without speaking with his patient. And he phoned to tell me, and that was devastating news that I had to provide. And it was a situation where we were told that this would advance his position to get into Homewood in Guelph. And if he was in a hospital, his position would go down on the list. I can tell you that 2 weeks after he killed himself, I got the letter in the mail at my home telling me that he had a bed. My previous husband was a psychiatrist. If a psychiatrist and the Medical Association cannot get help of a psychiatric nature, then where does that place us? And that's why we have this panel this afternoon. And that leads us into my first question for this panel. How do we, as lawyers, find help for ourselves? Whoever wants to field that question.
So I'll start, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
So I referred to the fact that I sought help from what was then called OLAP, the Ontario Lawyers Assistance Program. It now operates as something called MAP, the Members Assistance Program. I think they've not done quite a good enough job yet, the Law Society, in terms of advertising it. They run little ads in the ORs every week, but I know most of my contemporaries, and I've been out 25 years, most of my contemporaries don't read the ORs. When I go out, I'm always out there to say, there is help. It's a Law Society program. It's actually run through Homewood Human Solutions as an independent arm's length provider. It is, and I can speak about it with some detail if anyone has questions after, because I'm one of the peer volunteers in that program. I can tell you that it is completely and totally confidential. There's a 1-800 number that you can, and I'll try and find it and have it put up before the end of the day, that you can call 24 hours a day to get help, and they will do a whole bunch of things for you. They will set you up with professional help like psychologists, social workers, etc., and they'll also match you with peer volunteers, people like myself who have been through these sorts of things. It's similar to what Percy might talk about later in terms of the AA sponsorship idea. It's an amazing, amazing program. I believe it saved my life and my career. I lost a number of friends to either suicide or basically their bodies just gave out as a result of alcohol and or drugs. I believe my life was saved as a direct result of OLAP, and my career was as well. I've helped numerous people in the last 8 years or so through that. So that's one way that we can do it, and certainly that's the easiest and sort of most primary ways, and after I can talk about some other things that you can do. But the most important thing is to pick up that phone and call. The number one concern that I hear when I tell people about MAP is they say, but what if the Law Society finds out? It's completely confidential from the Law Society. The only information the Law Society gets is for auditing purposes in terms of numbers of clients serviced. They don't get any direct information, and certainly when you're referred to a peer as myself, whatever you tell me is completely confidential as well.
Thank you. And as another choice for people moving forward, Percy G, what would you recommend or suggest someone to do to get help themselves?
Well, from my perspective, one of the major problems we have is the idea of a person recognizing that they have a problem. Because for me, alcoholism is a disease of perception. The person doesn't realize or doesn't accept the fact that they actually have a problem. And I have actually seen one gentleman who was in our profession who didn't show up at a trial, and it was put off, and nothing was ultimately done. But as a result, I was asked by the judiciary in our local area if I could approach this gentleman, which I did, and suggested the program of AA, suggested also treatment. I also went to the Homewood for addiction, and ultimately, after I was able to convince the gentleman that I was in AA, and he saw that I was a lawyer and in AA, he didn't mind coming to AA meetings that I would go to, especially the open meetings, because open meetings is open to anybody. Closed meetings is only for alcoholics. So he was willing to come to some open meetings. I managed to connive some of the people who run various meetings if they couldn't get other lawyers, because we do have a number of lawyers that are in our area that are in the program, to be able to be speakers. He was able to relate to this particular set of facts because the lawyer was in the same field doing the same work as this person was, and ultimately that gentleman has now celebrated 2 years of sobriety. So,
wonderful. And that leads into the next area I was going to get into, which is, what about when the problem, whatever it is, mental health, alcohol, substance abuse, whatever the issue is not something that an individual is suffering, but rather something that a colleague, a friend, or someone else within their local practice is clearly suffering from? Anyone want to respond to how to address that type of situation? Thank you.
Sure. I think that the greatest challenge is where you have a person who isn't recognizing that they have a problem. And so when someone self-identifies and gets over that hurdle of that disease of perception, says, I need help, then that person is obviously on a much better track than a lot of people. And the people who are really going to have a challenge are the people who are in denial, do not see a problem, do not recognize a problem. And I can tell you firsthand that I have dealt with these situations in my job. And the greatest challenge that employers, for example, face is seeing someone and we do deal with a lot of law firms, seeing someone who is suffering and clearly has issues with their ability to do work, where there is suspicion that there is an alcohol or addiction program, and how to broach that topic. And that's where it gets really difficult, because you can't force anybody to go and get treatment just like that. It's a process. And so what I think we have to recognize is that there is a duty to accommodate people, but before that duty to accommodate, there's a duty to recognize that that person may have a problem. And what happens then is the employer, or in a law firm, in a partnership situation, the managing partner is going to have to make that very difficult decision to approach that person and to open up the discussion. And that's where things get difficult. But the truth is, it can't be ignored. And there is a duty to go and to open up that discussion. And sometimes that may be a discussion that person is not ready to have or willing to have or able to have. And then they want to seek a little guidance before they enter into that discussion and open up what can be, a big can of worms. It's a tough topic. Once they do open it up, then there's going to be a discussion whether that person is going to recognize there's a problem and maybe say, oh, thank God, like someone has come and brought this to me, and maybe now I'm going to get some help and do what I need to do. Or there may be a complete denial, and those are two totally different discussions that are going to have to take place.
Yeah, if I can just say, one of the problems is, and I say this, and I think Percy will certainly agree, addicts lie to everybody, but mostly addicts lie to themselves. And so the first few times that you approach a colleague who has this issue, and I know because I had some very, very good friends who approached me a year before I was ready to get help and said, dude, you need help. What can we do to help you? And I said, there's nothing wrong with me. You guys don't understand. I'm taking these drugs because I have chronic pain, man. Like, you don't get it. If you had to live with these migraines every day, you would take these narcotics too. Like, you just make stuff up and you justify and you say, well, I'm still going to work and I'm still doing my files and I'm still billing. And so sometimes it's a question in my mind of coming back to that person again and again and again, because if you're not going to get through the first time, leave it, in my opinion, leave it for a period of time and circle back to it. Don't let them go, don't ignore them, accept the fact that they're going to deny it, but then keep coming back and really just let them know, and Percy, you can tell me if you think I'm wrong, just let them know that you're there when they are ready, that you're there in a non-judgmental way to help them in any way that they need.
Percy, did you want to weigh in on that as well?
I totally agree in the idea of the perception. Once again, if you try to force a person into the program or try to before they recognize the problem, they get to have a hatred. And I would never go to that program because you're forcing the issue. And I can honestly say that my first, before I ever thought I had a problem, Peter Tobias, as he then was, as a lawyer, before he became a judge, had approached me in my office and suggested that I might have a problem with alcohol, and I politely escorted him out of the office with no uncertain terms. Needless to say, I ended up having to appear before him when he became judge, and I did have to apologize.
And that leads me into a touchy subject for all of us. We may know someone that we believe has an addiction issue or some sort of mental health issue. I'm speaking about a lawyer. And in the situation of someone who is senior to you, and no one in the bar, no one approaches that individual and no one addresses the issue. What should be done? How should that be handled? Because within our profession, it seems there's a lot of silence.
Well, I think there's a lot of silence because there's still this fear of, look, if you're, the panel before was talking about criminal law. You're a criminal lawyer, for example. People are placing everything in their lives. Their entire liberty is in your hands. How do you possibly come out and say, I can't even handle my own life, but let me take care of the most significant problems in yours? And there's a concern, and I had those concerns, and I'm sure Percy had those concerns, and anyone who's been through this, the concern is if I come out, people, my clients are going to leave, my partners are going to throw me out of the firm, my referral sources are going to dry up, and nobody's going to want anything to do with me. And I think my story, which pales in comparison to Percy's, but I think what we can tell you is that in fact there is no shame, and once you get through and recover and get to the other side, what you will find is that your clients will support you as long as you're honest about it. I found that by going out and being open and talking about these issues, it actually gives my clients extra confidence in me. And not only have I not lost any clients or any referral sources, in fact, I've gained, and I think I'm in a better position than I would have been. So I think the message really that we have is get the help, because once you get to the other side, in fact, you'll find that people are very supportive. The shame is actually in not getting the help. The shame is not in asking for the help.
I think, sorry.
Go ahead.
Also, one other thing. I think one of the things as in our profession, and I don't know if it applies here, it's the fear of the Law Society of Upper Canada. What's going to happen if they find out that I have a drinking problem? And that's where I have found the blockage is to try to tell them if they get help, that's what help is for, and the Law Society is going to appreciate it. I meant the best thing that ever happened was when the Law Society did their audit, and that was the ultimate be-all and end-all. I mean, I didn't think that at the time, let me tell you. I won't tell you what I thought about them at that time. But Janet, who was the auditor at that point in time, I've subsequently seen her and thanked her very much because she lives in our area, and for the work she did. I mean, I hated them with a passion, but it takes a while for you actually to realize that it was better. You can have life, you know, after drinking.
And with the Law Society, if you're willing to share, what ultimately happened with you?
What ultimately happened?
Yes.
Well, the audit started in 1991. The charges, the information was laid in 1993. That was the same time as Alan Eagleson was going through his thing, so I kept on getting bumped for Alan. For the hearing. So it took 2 years for my hearing to take place, and September the 28th ultimately was the hearing, the final hearing before all of the benchers. And because by that point in time I had been 2 years into AA, they realized that I was trying to do something. So instead of disbarment, which is what the Law Society and Christina Budweth at the time wanted, they agreed to have a 3-year suspension and certain terms and conditions thereafter, and which the benchers, believe it or not, all agreed that that would be better for the public at large than having me disbarred.
And I had shared with the panel some case law from the Law Society of Ontario, and in particular the Burt case, B-U-R-T-T, 2018 ONLSTH 63, and the Law Society of Ontario on the Yanath case. Pardon? Yantha case, thank you. 2018 ONLSTH 94. Would anyone like to discuss the content that I had forwarded to you?
I'll take that because I argued the Yantha case. Mr. Yantha was my client. That's my decision. And it's a decision I'm very proud of. I also am familiar with the Burt case. I gave, I think, 2 interviews, one to Law Times and one to Lawyers Weekly on it. The Yantha case did not turn out as well for Mr. Yantha because he was ultimately disbarred. The facts, if you read the case, are pretty clear. He was alleged to have, or found, it's not alleged anymore, it was determined by the panel that he had fraudulently overbilled legal aid. The importance of the case, though, and I considered it a win in some ways for the profession as a whole, if not for Mr. Yantha personally, sadly, but what I argued was a human rights component, and there have been a number of those cases argued. There was one major one that came just before me where the panel rejected the human rights argument. What we got in Yantha was a very, very firm and strong decision from the hearing panel, a unanimous hearing panel that said there's absolutely no doubt from here going forward, that the Law Society Tribunal the Law Society and the Tribunal have a duty to accommodate any member who has an addiction or mental health issue. These are disabilities under the Human Rights Code. What's not brought out in the case is, which I can talk about, is in the oral argument, in the closing submission, the bulk of my arguments went towards the human rights element. It was very, very important for me that we established that precedent. So the message from that and from the Burt decision is really that if you or anybody that you know is facing Law Society discipline and the circumstances which led to your discipline or investigation arose out of some sort of addiction, alcoholism, mental health issue, you need to let the Law Society know that. The minute you get that letter from the investigator, you've got to put them on notice that, hey, I'm not admitting to anything about this investigation, but I want you to know that I have a mental health issue, I have an addiction, I have alcoholism. Because if they don't know that, and I've represented many clients, I do a lot of work at the tribunal defending lawyers and paralegals. I've done a lot of work there where people bring out their addiction or mental health issue for the first time in the penalty hearing. And that's the first time there's any medical evidence about it. And it's simply, and there's a whole line of cases that say, like, that just doesn't fly, right? So what you need to do is get that information to the Law Society as quickly as possible, because now they're notified, and the Burt decision goes even further than the Antha decision and says the Law Society's on notice that you have this issue. They have to deal with you throughout the entire investigation and discipline process with that in mind.
With accommodation.
Yes.
The case is very clear.
Absolutely.
Throughout. Thank you. And that, just flipping over here for a minute. Leah would like to contribute as well, and brought to my attention that according to a recent Monster Canada survey, 58% of Canadians report feeling overworked and stressed out. 1/3 say their workload is their main cause of stress. I know that you wanted to weigh in about what companies, or in our case firms, can do to support work-life balance for employees.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Well, I think further to what everyone shared on this panel is that, starting with self-awareness is really the most important place to begin. So whether you're running a firm or you're a member at a firm, checking in with yourself and finding a way to look at how am I doing today? How am I going to support myself so that I can best support the work that I'm doing? We can't really avoid stress at work, but we can be more aware of it. So in the context of mindfulness and the work that we're doing at Mindfulness Without Borders, it's important to remember that you're always mindful of something. So mindfulness isn't this euphoric state that you achieve after sitting on a cushion for an hour and lighting the incense and being calm. Mindfulness is an action, okay? So you're mindfully aware of a challenging email that you're writing. You're mindfully aware of a difficult case that you're working on or a difficult colleague. Similarly to being mindfully aware of your breath or mindfully aware of a situation, it's an action that you can take on. So relevant sort of to this room, one thing that we're doing in collaboration with Western University is creating a course for first-year law students with Professor Telfer, and we're looking at developing emotional intelligence skills and mindfulness practices as tools to support them throughout their education so that once they're in positions like yours, they might have more skill sets under their belt sort of to support them and clients that they'd be working with.
And following out of that, can you share what EQ skill sets in particular will contribute to a thriving office environment?
Sure. So social and emotional skill sets are things like self-awareness, self-management, building healthy relationships, making responsible decisions. So in the context of what I'm talking about, sort of being mindfully aware of who you are and what you're doing, if you're aware that you have a certain reaction pattern, that awareness leads you to be able to make a better choice. So similar to what actually everyone on this panel has talked about in terms of that awareness is the first step, that sort of brings you into the next phase of being able to make a decision. Might take you a long time to get there, depending on the context, of course. But helping your colleagues or helping yourself, first and foremost, develop those awareness techniques can help support healthy office behavior.
Thank you. We spoke a bit about the duty to accommodate, and in particular, the Law Society throughout the investigation and also throughout the disciplinary hearing. What is the legal responsibility of employers and the duty to accommodate within a law office, a law environment? Anyone, please?
Yeah, I'm going back to my original discussion about the duty to accommodate. There is a very strong duty to accommodate, and as an employer, it's a very clear duty. What's interesting is that traditionally we looked at things as, you know, someone who's in a wheelchair or someone who has some sort of physical disability. Those were easy to spot, and employers understood that they may have to change their office space to accommodate that. But what has evolved in the case law, and very clearly, is a very strong duty to accommodate. And it's not just that someone has to come to you and tell you, as I was saying before, that they have a problem. You as an employer have a duty to really look and look around at your organization and have a very close connection to your employees and the people that work for you. And again, it is a very difficult thing to do, but it's okay if you see someone whose work habits have always been A+, and then all of a sudden they're slipping. If you look at someone who's got a lot of absenteeism, I have people in my company all the time coming to me saying, what do I do? Someone's not quite working out anymore. I'm saying, hold on, before we even talk about a potential termination situation, we need to dig a little deeper. Let's not just assume that they're just not performing. People have lives, people have family issues, and what was interesting, and we were talking about the Law Society cases, that someone's dad dying, people having family issues, those are also need to be taken into account. Those may lead to other issues such as substance abuse, and they may lead to greater mental health issues, and it may be the other way around. So we can't look at our employees as these automatons who come in, do their work, and go home. And so I've always said, and in the last talk I did with Katie, you know, it's like a family. If you see someone who's not doing well in your family, you don't just punt them out of the family. You say, what's going on? Let's talk. And again, as I said before, if that discussion is difficult for you to have, you can call up your HR people, you can find a professional who's going to give you the guidance as to how to open up that dialogue. If that's not something you, as maybe a managing partner in a law firm or as a colleague, is comfortable doing, you've got to go to someone to help you open up that dialogue and get that person help. And then there is a duty to accommodate, and it's messy. Mental health is not simple. If someone tells you, I've got depression, you may not know what that means, what to do about it. If they tell you they've got a substance abuse problem, all that stuff is messy for someone who's never dealt with it. But then there are people that you go to and you get help and you get informed on how to deal with that, how to accommodate. It may be time off. It may be getting them help through your employee assistance program. It may be referring them to a mental health practitioner and helping foot those bills. And one thing I did want to say, and it's not just Medcan, it's just generally, it's a lot easier to get help now virtually. There are many, many groups of psychologists who now will get on a phone or get on a computer, and you can have Skype psychology or social work appointments. So the whole stigma of getting your briefcase and going to a psychologist or going to see a mental health practitioner no longer exists. You can sit in a private space, get on your computer, and have a very personal discussion about the issues you're suffering from. And so I think as an employer, that's another offering you give to your employees. You help them with these resources, and you have that resource booklet built up as an employer, so you're not just paying lip service that we're going to accommodate you. You actually know how you're going to do that. And if you don't know how you're going to do that, you start to seek that booklet. So when it happens, you're not scrambling and taking 2 days. The last thing you want is something to happen. You know, as Leah was saying, sometimes a day or two can make a difference. And I'm really sorry to hear about your story. It's tragic, right? But in my work and working in a medical clinic, I can tell you sometimes minutes count, hours can count, seconds can count, where there's a sensitivity to an understanding that there is potentially a crisis with someone in your employ, and you need to act immediately. And you don't want to be saying, who should we call up to help because I've got someone having a breakdown at work? You have those resources in place now. And if you don't, you find out where you get them and you assemble that. and then you help those people and you treat them like family members.
Thank you. I was just going to see if we could, if someone else hasn't already, Google the phone number that we could provide, so that on the heels of exactly what you're saying, minutes count. And people need to know, lawyers need to know where to dial. And there is a 1-800 number, and I think we're going to try to find that so we can provide that right now. One of the questions I posed earlier.
I have the website.
Excellent.
So the website is myassistplan.com. MYASSISTPLAN. Myassistplan.
Thank you.
.com. And the toll-free number is 1-855-403-8922.
Thank you. I know when I addressed at the Ontario Bar Association in a forum very similar to this, we reached out and said to everyone, you have your cell phones, take them out. Take out your smartphones right now if you're not already busy on it, and put that in your list right now. 1-855-403-8922. Have it handy, have it ready. You never know when you're going to need to make that phone call or hand that number over to a colleague. It could save someone's life. This is very, very serious business. That takes me back to my original question. Not dealing with a larger firm type environment, but in the smaller cities and smaller towns where we have a lot of sole practitioners who are self-monitoring and self-governing, and you know someone has an issue, what should be done? Who should reach out? How is that structured? Because oftentimes in smaller communities, we know of these issues, especially when it's a senior counsel, and no one anywhere, not a Crown attorney, not a judge, no one, colleagues, friends, no one says anything. They speak to each other behind closed doors, but they never go out and reach out to that individual who continues to struggle in their state of whatever it may be, let's say alcoholism. And we hear from Percy that in the end, the change was a positive, although it was a difficult thing to go through. The friends that we know and colleagues don't necessarily want you to approach them. We've heard that. Does anyone have any suggestion as to how to handle that in our own unique communities? It's a tough one, Percy, I know.
It is, and
people reached out to you.
Right. Other than approach the person, and I have. I mean, our judiciaries would, from day one, knew that when I would join AA, because I just advised them. So they are quick to ask me to help to see if I can get a person involved in AA or in some 12-step program. The aspect of going and asking the person and getting them to recognize, it's sort of like climbing a mountain. It's long, it's progressive, but I can make arrangements to get a person generally to come to an open meeting because they just get sick and tired of me bugging them. And so they'll come to an open meeting and I generally can make sure that there's a speaker that they can definitely relate to. And we still have people in our area that I think drink too much, but that's my opinion. Until they recognize there's a problem, they don't think they have a problem.
In this room, we have presidents and the delegates of presidents. Is there any responsibility on the presidents or people on the board of associations when they have an association member that they can clearly identify by all appearance is having an issue? Is there a responsibility to do something, or do we maintain silence to the detriment of our colleagues and friends?
So I don't think there's I think there's no legal obligation, but I do think there's potentially for lack of a better term, a leadership obligation that, you know, if you're the president or vice president of a law association, you're one of the leaders of the legal community in whatever jurisdiction, whether it's a big organization like Toronto or a small organization in Kenora, you're one of the leaders of the bar in that community, and I think it behooves you on behalf of, as a leader and on behalf of the membership, that if nobody else is doing anything and you hear about it, perhaps you have to be the person or delegate somebody who knows the person better to make that overture. And that's just in my mind, sort of a sense of personal
I don't think you
Thank
can
you.
limit that just to the presidents. I think if you've tried your best and you think that society as a whole, the public has had a risk, I think you have a duty to call the Law Society of Upper Canada.
I think that I'm going to disagree with Percy for a moment. I believe that if that person that has a problem, if you believe that they're a danger to the public because they're not showing up for court appearances, because you have concerns that they're not billing properly or they're taking money improperly, if you're concerned that clients are really going to be damaged as a result, absolutely in that scenario you have an obligation. I think our rules of professional conduct require in that scenario that we report. But I think if it's not risen to that kind of level, I'd be reluctant to report that person because I'd want to approach them and see if they could get help without them having to go through the hell of the Law Society. Because despite, I will say this, I don't think Mr. Mercer is here yet, but he's heard me say this. I've said it to him before. I don't think, despite all of these good things that are happening at the Law Society, like the funding of the Members' Assistance Program and these recent decisions from the tribunal, I still don't believe the Law Society does nearly enough on these issues for our members.
I'll step away from that one.
I speak just for me. I do not speak on behalf of my firm or anybody else in this room. It's just my personal opinion.
Thank you. How does helping others help with one's own recovery?
You want to go? No.
Oh, that's it's the only way you get to keep it is by giving it away. Really. You may not be able to get the other person sober or whatever, but it's definitely major in your own recovery. Sponsorship is a very major issue, and without giving it away, it would be nigh on to impossible to keep it. I mean, if you're an alcoholic of my type. I mean, there are alcoholics of other types that I think, you know, they get a medical notification that they're going to die in 6 months if they don't stop drinking, and they stop drinking. That didn't work with me.
Too late sometimes.
Yeah.
The cirrhosis is there.
Sometimes when a marriage breaks up, that's it, you know, that's sufficient, and or a catastrophe happens in their life. When my marriage broke up, when I came into AA, it was sort of like, it wasn't my life that was unmanageable, it was my wife that was unmanageable. And I used to make fun of the first step, but you know, it's just the idea of being able to give it away is part of keeping a better reins on realism.
Yeah, I agree with Percy entirely. Every time that I go out and do one of these talks or sit on one of these panels, I was speaking at Markham Stouffville Hospital 2 weeks ago to 200 people at their annual mental health day. I've spoken a bunch of times, about once a month I do these. Every time I do it, it's a reminder of what I went through, and that helps keep me focused and going forward. So I think most of us who do this sort of work, either as AA sponsors or peer volunteers within MAP, I think we'd all have the same answer, that by doing it, it helps keep us in check.
Thank you. Stress can take on many forms, whether it's work or home related. What are some of the precautionary measures that can be integrated into our lives to mitigate against stress?
Well, I'll give this answer. I spoke to, some of you here know, I spoke to a large group of family law lawyers back in, I think, February about wellness, and I was asked this very question, and I said the answer is stop practicing family law. And I'm learning now the answer is also, perhaps if you don't have a 14-year-old daughter, your life will be less stressful.
Leah?
Do you want to go
Go ahead first, and I can
Go ahead.
Okay. I think what's interesting is, for example, at Medcan, and that's where I'm from, so it's my context, what we've been trying to do is expand our programming. And so we're doing a lot more, as opposed to just health assessments for people who come in once a year. We're really trying to look at the whole person. And that's not just Medcan, that's everybody is starting to understand that there's a holistic perspective of wellness, and it encompasses exercise, it encompasses things like mindfulness. But really, I think that what we need to understand is, before we go to all of that, there also needs to be a destigmatization of all the issues that we're talking about. And so as an employer, or as someone who runs a law firm, whether big or small, there really does have to be communication to people that, hey, we're aware that you may have these problems, and it's okay if you come to talk to us. I think there needs to be a proactive program in place where people know that they can talk about these things before they happen. And so that's like a first step for just people having that comfort level for dealing with them. On the other front, you know, employers have to put their money where their mouth is and do things to make it easy for people to have balance. The challenge for lawyers, and I tend to work downtown, and a lot of our clients are downtown big firm lawyers, there is no work-life balance. They're billing 2,000 hours plus a year in very high stress environments. And as much as we talk about all of this, I can't tell you fundamentally that most law firms are doing business any differently than when I was in private practice in a large firm, you know, over 20 years ago. So that is really something we keep talking about. I'm not seeing a huge shift, although now there's starting to be a little more, and I think this program that you're doing with law students is absolutely phenomenal, and hopefully programs that start there with law students in law school and thinking about these things before they dive into the, you know, the law firm practice is going to make a huge shift. But employers need to make it easier for people to get out and exercise and have a work-life balance. If they don't, it's never going to happen.
Is there potential to expand into the other law schools throughout the province?
Yeah, we're very hopeful. We're following the leadership of Professor Telfer. We've run a couple focus groups, and we're going into the third year of sort of piloting the program. He fills the course within 90 minutes of it being available to students, so there is real need for that. Further to your comments about stigmatization, you know, mental well-being exists on a spectrum. It's not like we're mentally well or we're mentally unwell. We're all there somewhere, and conditions in our lives and in our environments will drive us from one end to the other. So the better prepared you can be as an individual, or if you have employees or a firm that you're running, to make sure that opportunities are available for people to learn about psychologists online or different groups that they can join. You're just supporting yourself and the success of everyone that you're working with.
I think, if I can add one thing, I think there has to be an acceptance of each of us, and that is to understand that if you don't answer that email right away, or you don't answer that call, or you don't get that work done today, that it may not be fatal to your career. You're not going to lose your clients. And you have to, I've managed in the last 8 years or 9 years to really try to find that balance by understanding hard deadlines and soft deadlines. There's limitation periods, there's motion materials that have due dates, but then there's all of this. Every client that comes through your door wants it done now, and you've just got to say to them, I'm sorry, it's not going to be done now. I have a court case next week, your thing will be done in 2 weeks. It's really important, and take vacation. I take a month off every summer, 2 weeks at Christmas, a week at March break, and little pocket weekends throughout. Technology is good and bad. On the one hand, the technology ties us. On the other hand, I could never have done that. When I got called to the bar in 1993, I could barely take a week away because we all know this story, the paper piles of. Now, I can be away for an entire month in Europe every July, and I can spend an hour a day and be up to date with what's going on. So use the technology to your advantage to allow you to actually have more work-life balance, not less.
And just closing on one last question. As lawyers, we are often dealing with the stress of others who come along and dump on us. Not just the clients or a boss, other counsel even, lack of civility from time to time. Perhaps anyone here could discuss how mindfulness can help with these interpersonal relationships.
We need to be nicer to each other. It's that simple. We have to stop taking the cases. You know, I teach several courses at Osgood, and one of the things I teach the students in trial advocacy is it's not your case. It's your client's case. And there's nobody, Alfie Shore is there from York Region, there's nobody more civil than him. Everybody take a lesson from people like that. We all have senior members of the bar we can look to who operate with civility. It's not our case, we just have a job to do, and we need to get along with each other because it's going to make our jobs a lot more enjoyable.
Yes, please.
I'll come at this. I don't know if anybody in here is an in-house lawyer. That's where I am now, and I'm previously a litigation lawyer in a large firm, so I've been on both sides. The unique perspective of me being an in-house lawyer is that I am just having my door knocked on about every 10 seconds because people come to me and I'm the problem solver, and so everything goes wrong. They come to me and they want me magically to make everything better. And so what I find is trying to bring a message to any organization that you're working with about how to manage conflict. And one thing I do at my company is that I try to teach people to have difficult discussions and try to bring down temperatures on a day-to-day basis amongst themselves so that things don't blow up. And they're like, well, I felt uncomfortable, and then everything blows up. I'm like, have the difficult discussions early on in any kind of conflict, whether it's patient-doctor, whether it's employee to employee, whether it's manager-employee. And once you start to set that as sort of the vibe of your organization, you're going to have a lot less problems internally, and then less problems are going to come to me. But I think it's across the board in any workplace, whether it's a law firm, whether you're in-house, whether you're dealing with other litigators. Try to manage conflict early on. Try to have those discussions. And to your point, like lawyers can get really nasty with each other as litigators. I've been there. But a lot of time that's because they don't deal with the big, massive issues, and everything just boils and boils and boils and explodes, and you've got like massive, terrible discussions going on. And so just trying to manage conflict from the ground up right before it begins is a huge theme that I think can benefit everybody towards treating each other better and having less stress that we were talking about.
And if I can add one more thing, fire your toxic clients. I just realized as we're saying, I actually fired a client yesterday who's constantly rude to myself and my staff, and I just said enough is enough, and I dictated a letter that said, thank you for your business, here's the return of your retainer, here's your file. We're afraid to do that as lawyers. We're all afraid, like, I can't give away any files. The reality is there's enough work for all of us out there, and I'd rather have one less file, and 99% of my clients are people I enjoy working with.
And sometimes that can be a personality conflict where the client's going to be better suited to another lawyer. Absolutely. In any event. I know I'm 1 minute over, but I just wanted to make sure, Leah, that it was your question that you wanted to ask about mindfulness and the help of mindfulness with interpersonal relationships. I wanted to make sure if there was anything in particular that you wanted to share, you had that opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just add in quickly, if you think of mindfulness as intentional attention, so just pay attention to what you're paying attention to and do it on purpose. A lot of people on the panel talked about that non-judgment lens as well. So doing one thing at a time can help you pay more attention to what's really in front of you and not stress about everything else that you have to do that day or panic about everything you did wrong yesterday, and just pay attention to what's there.
Thank you. I thank the entire panel for taking time from your busy schedules to be here.